The ballroom of the Grand Astor Hotel was a sea of glittering chandeliers and whispered secrets. Crystal glasses clinked against each other like nervous teeth, and the air was thick with a scent of expensive perfume and even more expensive lies. For Noah Kincaid, this was the seventh circle of hell dressed in a rented tuxedo. He stood near the back wall, his shoulders pressed against the cold marble pillar, watching the glittering masses with the practiced stillness of a man who had once spent weeks in a jungle hideout waiting for a single shot. His jaw was tight, his blue eyes scanning every entrance and exit out of pure muscle memory. The gala was a cattle call for the city's elite, the annual charity fundraiser hosted by the Sterling Foundation. It was also, unfortunately, a mandatory attendance event for his boss, Diana Sterling, CEO of Sterling International. His boss, the woman who signed his paychecks, and, tonight, the woman who was the single most dangerous person in the room, not because she was ruthless, though she was, but because she was the only person who made him feel like he was standing on the edge of a cliff with no harness. He tugged at his collar, hating the constriction. He'd rather be in full tactical gear, knee-deep in swamp water, than standing here in patent leather shoes that pinched his toes. 3 years ago, he'd been a Navy SEAL, a man whose missions were classified and whose enemies had names he didn't need to remember. Now, he was a glorified bodyguard and operations manager for a billionaire CEO who could probably arm wrestle a bear and win. He'd taken the job because it was safe for him, safe for his daughter. Olivia was at home with Mrs. Gable, his elderly, terrifying neighbor who doubled as a babysitter. She was 8 years old, with a gap-toothed smile and eyes that had seen too much. Her mother, Noah's ex-wife, had walked out 3 years ago, leaving behind a Dear John text and a pile of unpaid bills. He'd learned to be a father and a soldier in the same breath, but it was fatherhood that had almost broken him. He'd taken the job with Sterling International precisely because it meant a steady paycheck, health insurance, and a schedule that let him pick Olivia up from school. But nothing in his contract said anything about being Diana Sterling's date for a charity gala. "Kincaid, you look like you're about to storm a beachhead." The voice was low, amused, and far too close. He turned, his body tensing instinctively, and found himself face to face with his boss. Diana Sterling was a vision in midnight blue silk. The gown clung to her like a second skin, its neckline plunging just enough to be scandalous, but not enough to be common. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her lips were painted a shade of red that reminded him of a warning label. She was tall for a woman, almost meeting his chin, and she carried herself like she owned every room she walked into. Because she did. Her presence was magnetic, commanding, and utterly exhausting. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat. "I'm working the perimeter. You should be mingling with the donors." Diana's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've done enough mingling for one night. My feet hurt, and the champagne is cheap." She stepped closer, entering his personal space with the casual arrogance of someone who had never been told no. "And for the record, I don't need perimeter security. I need a date. My original one, a very charming British lord, cancelled at the last minute to go yachting with his mistress." Noah pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'm your head of operations. I'm not a rent-a-date. Tonight you are." She reached up and adjusted his bow tie with practiced ease. Her fingers brushed against his collarbone, and he felt the contact like a jolt of electricity.
His jaw tightened.
"You look like you're about to bolt, Kincaid."
"Don't."
"I need you to look convincing. In an hour, the press will swarm. They'll take photos of us. They'll ask questions. They'll want to know who the mysterious, brooding hunk is on the arm of the Ice Queen." "I don't do photos," he said flatly. "Tonight you do." Her voice softened, just a fraction. "Look, I'm not asking you to be my boyfriend. I'm asking you to stand next to me, look intimidating, and nod when I introduce you. That's it. The donors like to see me with a strong, capable man. It makes them feel secure about their investments." He stared at her, taking in the faint shadows under her eyes that the expensive makeup couldn't quite hide. She looked tired, exhausted even. In the 3 years he'd worked for her, he'd learned to read the small tells. The way her hands fidgeted when she was nervous. The way she overperfected her posture when she was anxious. He'd never asked about her personal life, never wanted to. But he knew her reputation, the ruthless, untouchable CEO who had climbed to the top on a ladder of broken competitors and forgotten business partners. She was a wolf, and wolves didn't get tired. But she did. Fine, he heard himself say. 1 hour. I stand next to you. I don't smile, and I don't talk to the press. Her face broke into a genuine smile, and it transformed her. She went from intimidating to almost soft. I knew I kept you around for more than just your ability to handle supply chain logistics. She looped her arm through his and steered him toward the crowd. The next hour was a blur of fake smiles and political handshakes. Diana introduced him as Noah Kincaid, my head of operations, with a casual air that made it sound like he was some kind of secret weapon. He hated it. He hated the way people looked at him, sizing him up, wondering if he was more than just an employee. Diana kept her hand on his arm the entire time, a possessive gesture that felt both protective and performative. Then the press swarm came. Cameras flashed, and microphones were shoved in their faces. Diana handled it with practiced grace, answering questions about the foundation, the upcoming merger, and the new eco-friendly initiative. But then a reporter with a sharp grin asked the question Noah had been dreading. Miss Sterling, is this your new beau? You've been famously single for years. Who's the lucky man? Diana's smile didn't waver. She turned to Noah, her dark eyes glittering with something he couldn't quite read. And then she leaned in close, her lips brushing against his ear. Her breath was warm, her voice low enough that only he could hear. I'm your date, she whispered. Just play along. And then she pulled back, her hand sliding up his chest to rest over his heart, and pressed a kiss to his cheek. The cameras exploded. The reporter's jaw dropped. Noah stood frozen, every nerve in his body on high alert. His heart was hammering against his ribs, and he felt a heat creep up the back of his neck that had nothing to do with the gala's overheated ballroom. Diana turned back to the press, still smiling. Noah and I have been keeping things private, she said smoothly. But I suppose the secret's out now. The questions multiplied, a cacophony of voices demanding details. Noah's mind raced. She had just thrown him to the wolves, and she'd done it with the precision of a CEO closing a deal. He felt a flash of anger, sharp and clean. She hadn't asked permission. She hadn't warned him. She'd used him like a shield. He forced a tight smile for the cameras, his hand coming up to rest possessively on Diana's lower back. If she was going to play this game, then she'd play it with both of them on the same page. He leaned down and murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. We're going to have a very long conversation about this later. Diana's smile flickered, just for a second, before snapping back into place. I'm counting on it, she murmured back. The press conference ended, and Diana steered them toward the back exit. The moment they were out of sight, Noah pulled his arm free. His expression was thunderous. What the hell was that? She sighed, rubbing her temples. I needed a statement. I needed to show them that I'm not a machine, that I can have a life. She met his gaze, and for a moment, the mask slipped. My board is worried I'm too focused on work. They think I'm unstable, that I'm a liability, because I have no personal connections. I needed to look human. So you used me, he said flatly. Yes, she admitted, without a trace of remorse. I used you, and I'm sorry. But I'm not sorry about the result. The stock will go up, the board will back off, and you'll get a bonus. A big one. I don't want your money, he snapped. I want honesty.
You could have asked me.
You could have told me what you were planning. Instead, you blindsided me. You would have said no. Her voice was quiet, almost soft. You're right. I would have. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling under his skin. I have a daughter. I have a reputation. I don't need the press digging into my life because you decided to play games with mine. Diana's face paled. She looked, for just a second, genuinely unsettled. I didn't think about Olivia.
I'm sorry, Noah.
I truly am. I was so focused on my own problems that I didn't consider how this would affect her. He let out a hollow laugh. You think I'm worried about what the press will do? No, I'm worried about what you'll do next. You use people, Diana. You use them and toss them aside. I've seen it in the boardroom, and now I'm seeing it in person. I'm not a pawn in your game. I'm not a prop. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. I didn't mean to make you feel like a prop. She hesitated, a crack in her armor. I've never had anyone I could trust. Not really. I thought maybe you were different. He studied her, searching for the lie. But there was none. She looked small, almost fragile, standing there in her expensive gown with the weight of a corporate empire on her shoulders. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers who had lost too many friends. She was a survivor just like him. Different, he repeated. You don't even know me. I know you're a good father, she said quietly. I know you're loyal. I know you'd never betray a trust. And I know, because you've never once looked at me like I'm a stepping stone to something better. She took a step closer. I'm not asking for your trust, Noah. I'm asking for your cooperation. One night, one statement, and then we go back to being boss and employee. He stared at her for a long moment. The air between them was thick, charged with unspoken words. Then, from the entrance to the ballroom, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Mommy.
Daddy.
Noah's blood ran cold. He turned to see Olivia running toward him, her pink dress a blur of ruffles, her face lit up with joy. Behind her, looking apologetic, was Mrs. Gable, holding a purse and a coat. Noah's world tilted. Olivia had never met Diana. She didn't know about the charade. And now, in front of a ballroom full of prying eyes and a press swarm that was still hovering near the exits, his daughter had just called him and his boss, Mommy and Daddy. Diana's sharp intake of breath was the only sound. She looked at the girl, then at Noah, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else, something that looked dangerously like understanding. The cameras, still searching for a story, swiveled in their direction. The flashbulb started popping. Noah's heart stopped, and then, with the grace of a woman who had been in crisis management her entire life, Diana stepped forward, knelt down, and held her arms open. Hi, sweetheart, she said, her voice soft and warm. I've heard so much about you. Olivia, trusting and innocent, ran into her arms. Noah watched, frozen, as Diana Sterling, the woman who had just turned his carefully ordered life into a circus, wrapped her arms around his daughter and smiled at the cameras like she'd been doing it forever. The game had just changed. And Noah had no idea how to play it. The flashbulbs were relentless. Each pop of light felt like a small explosion going off behind Noah's eyes, and he stood there, frozen in the middle of the Grand Astor's marble foyer, watching his entire carefully constructed world shatter into 1,000 glittering pieces. Olivia was still wrapped in Diana's arms, her small face buried against the midnight blue silk, and Diana, who had never once mentioned children or family or anything remotely personal in 3 years of working together, was stroking his daughter's hair like she'd been doing it her whole life. Sweetheart, Diana murmured, soft and soothing, you must be Olivia. I've heard so much about you. Olivia pulled back just enough to look up at the stranger holding her. Her big brown eyes were wide, but there was no fear in them. Noah had taught her to be cautious, but she was also 8 years old and still believed the best in everyone. You're really pretty, Olivia said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence of the foyer. Are you my daddy's girlfriend? The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Noah felt his throat close up. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but Diana beat him to it. Your daddy and I are good friends, she said smoothly, rising to her feet without letting go of Olivia's hand. He's been helping me with a very important event tonight. And you must be his most important person, aren't you? Olivia nodded, beaming. I'm his whole world. He says so every night. Noah's heart twisted. He'd said those words 1,000 times, in 1,000 quiet moments, never imagining they'd be repeated in front of a billionaire CEO and a pack of hungry journalists. He stepped forward, placing himself between Olivia and the cameras. Mrs. Gable, I thought I told you to keep her at home. The elderly woman's face flushed an embarrassed red. She had a nightmare, Mr. Kincaid. She kept crying for you. I didn't know what else to do. The car service brought us straight here, and she ran ahead before I could stop her. A nightmare. Noah knelt down, his hands cupping Olivia's face. Baby, what happened? Olivia's lower lip trembled. The bad dream came back. The one where you leave and never come back. I woke up, and you weren't there, and I got scared. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I know you always come back, but I just needed to see you. The anger that had been simmering in Noah's chest, at Diana, at the press, at the whole ridiculous circus of a gala, dissolved into something rawer and much more painful. He pulled Olivia into a hug, pressing a kiss to her hair. I'm never leaving you, Liv. Never. You know that. I know, she mumbled against his shoulder. But I still get scared sometimes. Diana stood nearby, watching the exchange with an expression Noah couldn't read. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, maybe, or longing. She'd said she'd lost someone, a child. He'd heard the rumor in the office, whispered in hushed tones when she wasn't around. He'd never given it much thought because it wasn't his business. But now, seeing her watch him with Olivia, he understood that she knew exactly what it felt like to be afraid of losing someone you loved. The press was closing in. Noah could hear the rumble of questions, the shuffle of feet, the click of camera shutters. He needed to get Olivia out of here. He needed to shut this whole thing down before it spiraled any further. Mrs. Gable, take Olivia to the car, he said, his voice low and urgent. I'll be there in 5 minutes. I don't want to go, Olivia protested, clinging to his hand. I want to stay with you. And I want to stay with the pretty lady.
No, sweetheart.
You need to go home. It's past your bedtime. But, Olivia. Diana's voice cut through, soft but firm. She crouched down, bringing herself to eye level with the girl. Your daddy is right. It's late, and you need your rest. But I tell you what, how about I come visit you one day? Maybe we can do something fun. Just the three of us. Olivia's eyes lit up. Really, you promise? Diana extended her pinky. I promise. Pinky swear. Olivia linked her tiny pinky with Diana's and nodded solemnly. Okay, but you have to come soon. Like this week. Or I'll forget. I'll be there, Diana said with a smile that looked terrifyingly genuine. Mrs. Gable took Olivia's hand and led her toward the exit. Noah watched them go, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. The moment the doors swung shut behind them, he turned on Diana with a fury he couldn't contain. Are you insane? He hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. What the hell was that? Diana straightened, her composure sliding back into place like armor. I was handling a situation. Your daughter ran into my arms in front of the entire New York press corps. I could have shoved her away and made it worse, or I could have played along and bought us time. You didn't have to promise to visit her, he said, his voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. You didn't have to feed her some fantasy about the three of us. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I know exactly what I've done, Diana said, her voice dropping dangerously low. I've created a narrative. A story that the press will eat up. A story that buys us time to figure out how to handle the fallout without destroying your reputation or mine. She stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted to stand there and pretend to be part of your family while a pack of jackals circled us? I was trying to protect you. Both of you. Protect me? Noah laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're the one who dragged me into this gala. You're the one who kissed me in front of the cameras. You're the one who turned my life into a headline. You don't get to stand there and act like you're the hero of this story. I never said I was a hero. Diana shot back, her voice sharp as a blade. I'm a survivor. I do what I have to do to survive. And right now, I'm trying to make sure you survive too. Because whether you like it or not, Noah, you're in this with me now. The press is going to dig. They're going to find out about Olivia, about your past, about your ex-wife. And the only way we come out of this intact is if we're a united front. I don't want a united front, he said, his voice raw. I want my life back. I want my daughter to be safe. I want to go back to being the guy who manages your logistics and stays invisible. That's not an option anymore, Diana said quietly. And I'm sorry. I know I'm the reason this happened. I own that. but we have to move forward. We have to think strategically. Noah stared at her, his chest heaving with barely controlled emotion. He'd survived ambushes in foreign countries, firefights in the desert, and the slow, grinding agony of a broken marriage. But this was different. This was a war he hadn't signed up for, and the battlefield was his own life. "What's your plan?" he finally asked, his voice flat. Diana's shoulders dropped, just slightly, as if she'd been bracing for a verbal explosion that hadn't come. "I have a private car waiting. We'll leave through the service exit. I'll call my PR team and have them draft a statement. We'll say we've been dating quietly for a few months. We'll keep it vague. The press will lose interest in a week or two." "And Olivia," he pressed. "What about her?" Diana hesitated. "I meant what I said. I'll come visit her. Not for the cameras, but because—" She broke off, her gaze flickering away. "Because I know what it's like to be a kid who needs adults to keep their promises. I won't be another disappointment in her life." Something in Noah's chest cracked just a little. He thought about the way Diana had crouched down to Olivia's level, the softness in her voice, the way she'd held out her pinky like it was the most natural thing in the world. It didn't fit with the cold, calculating CEO he'd worked for 3 years. It didn't fit with the woman who had just manipulated him into a fake relationship for the benefit of her board and her stock price. But it was real. He'd seen enough lies to know when something was genuine. "Fine," he said, exhaling heavily.
Fine.
"But we do this on my terms. Olivia comes first. Always. If this starts to hurt her in any way, I'm out. I'll resign. I'll disappear, and you'll never see me again." Diana nodded slowly. "That's fair." "And the visit," he added, his voice firm. "It's just you and her.
No câmeras, no PR, no spin.
You come to my place, you bring a toy or something, and you sit on the floor and play with her like a normal person. If you can't do that, then you stay away." Diana's lips curved into a small, almost shy smile. "I can do that. I was a normal person once, before the empire." Noah didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded. "Let's go." The service exit. They slipped out of the hotel through a narrow corridor that smelled of bleach and stale coffee. Diana's driver was waiting in a black SUV with tinted windows. Noah slid into the back seat, his body exhausted, but his mind still racing. Diana followed, settling into the seat across from him with the practiced grace of someone who had been driven around her entire life. The car pulled away from the curb, and the glittering lights of the Grand Astor faded in the rearview mirror. Noah leaned his head against the window, feeling the cool glass against his temple. He should have felt relief. He was out. He'd escaped the press, the cameras, the suffocating weight of 100 prying eyes. But he didn't, because he knew this wasn't over. "This was just the beginning. What are you thinking about?" Diana asked, her voice soft. He turned to look at her. In the dim light of the car, she looked younger, less polished. The shadows under her eyes were more pronounced, and there was a vulnerability in her posture that she never showed in public. "I'm thinking about how my daughter called you Mommy," he said quietly, "and how I have no idea what to tell her tomorrow morning." Diana winced. That was unexpected. "Unexpected," he repeated, a dark humor coloring his voice. "That's one word for it." "I'll make it right," she said, her voice urgent. "I'll explain it to her. I'll tell her that we're friends, that I was just helping you tonight, that—" "No." Noah cut her off. "You'll let me handle it. I'm her father. I'll figure out what to say. You just show up when you said you would. That's all I ask." Diana nodded, her expression subdued. "Okay, I can do that." The rest of the drive was silent. Noah closed his eyes, letting the hum of the engine fill his head. He thought about Olivia, about the nightmare she'd had, about the way she'd run to him through a crowded ballroom. He thought about Diana, about the child she'd lost, about the armor she wore so effectively that most people forgot she was human at all. He thought about his ex-wife, about the day she'd left, about the long, lonely nights he'd spent wondering if he was good enough, if he could ever be enough for anyone. And he thought about the kiss. The way Diana's lips had brushed against his cheek, the way her breath had ghosted over his ear, the way his heart had hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. It had been a performance. He knew that. But it had felt real, and that was the most dangerous part of all. The SUV pulled up to his building, a modest brownstone in Brooklyn that he'd bought with his severance pay and a prayer. Noah opened the door, stepping out into the cool night air. Diana's voice stopped him.
Noah.
He turned back. She was leaning out the window, her face half-lit by the glow of the street lamp. "Thank you," she said softly, "for playing along, for trusting me, even a little. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you." He didn't say anything. He just nodded once and walked up the steps to his front door. The lock clicked open, and he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The house was quiet. Mrs. Gable had put Olivia to bed, and her small room was dark, her stuffed bear clutched to her chest. Noah stood in the doorway, watching his daughter sleep, and felt the weight of the night pressing down on him. He had a fake relationship with a billionaire CEO, a press corps that would be hounding him by morning, and a daughter who was too smart and too perceptive for her own good. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that Diana Sterling was more than just his boss. She was a woman who had lost everything and rebuilt herself from the ashes. She was a woman who had looked at his daughter with something that looked dangerously like love. He didn't know what the next day would bring. But he knew one thing for certain. His quiet, ordered life was over, and the war had only just begun. The first rays of dawn crept through the gap in Noah's bedroom curtains, painting thin stripes of gold across the worn wooden floor. He'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous night like a scratched record. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flashbulbs. He heard Olivia's voice calling out "Mommy" in that bright, trusting tone. He felt the phantom warmth of Diana's lips against his cheek. He'd been a SEAL. He'd been trained to compartmentalize, to push through exhaustion and fear and chaos with surgical precision. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this, the slow, creeping realization that his life had been upended by a single, well-aimed kiss. The sound of small feet padding across the hallway floor pulled him from his spiral. Olivia appeared in his doorway, her hair a wild tangle of dark curls, her favorite stuffed bunny dragging behind her by one ear. She was wearing her pajamas, the ones with the tiny rocket ships, and her face was still puffy with sleep. "Daddy," she said, her voice a soft rasp. "Is the pretty lady coming today?" Noah sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. He ran a hand through his hair and forced a smile onto his face. "Not today, sweetheart. Today is Saturday. We have pancakes and cartoons." Remember, Olivia's brow furrowed in concentration. But she pinky swore. "You're not supposed to break pinky swears. That's like super bad luck." He felt a pang of guilt so sharp it almost made him wince. He'd promised her pancakes and cartoons. He'd promised her a normal weekend, free from the chaos of his job and the complications of his life. And then Diana Sterling had waltzed into their lives with her midnight blue gown and her knowing smile and her pinky swears that meant nothing. "Liv," he said gently, patting the bed beside him. "Come here." She climbed up, tucking herself against his side like she'd done 1,000 times before. Her small hand found his, and she squeezed it. "The pretty lady is my boss," he began carefully. "She's a very important person, and she has a lot of responsibilities. She told me she wants to visit you, but sometimes important people get busy. They have meetings and phone calls and things that take up all their time." Olivia considered this for a moment. "But she said this week. That's not a lot of time. She could squeeze in one visit, like if she really wanted to." Noah opened his mouth to respond, but the words died in his throat. Because Olivia was right. Diana had made a promise, and promises weren't meant to be broken. But more than that, there was something in his daughter's voice, a thread of hope, fragile and earnest, that he couldn't bear to sever. "Tell you what," he said, pulling her closer. "If the pretty lady doesn't visit this week, I'll take you to the zoo. The big one, with the elephants and the penguins. Deal?" Olivia's face lit up, the shadow of disappointment vanishing in an instant.
"Deal.
But I want to hold your hand the whole time. And I want to see the baby giraffes." "Baby giraffes," he repeated, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You've got it." The morning unfolded in its usual rhythm. Pancakes, the ones with the chocolate chips that Olivia insisted on dropping into the batter herself. Cartoons, the ones with the singing animals that drove Noah mildly insane. A bath, during which Olivia turned the entire bathroom floor into a miniature ocean. By noon, the normalcy of it all had started to soothe some of the jagged edges from the night before. Noah was even starting to think that maybe, just maybe, the press had found something else to chew on. Maybe the story would die, and he could go back to being the invisible logistics manager who picked up his daughter from school and fell asleep on the couch by 9. Then the doorbell rang and Olivia scrambled off the couch, her bunny forgotten. I'll get it. I'll get it. No, wait. Noah was on his feet, his body moving on instinct. He reached the door just as Olivia pulled it open. Diana Sterling stood on his doorstep. She was dressed in a pair of dark jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater that looked impossibly soft. Her hair was down, falling in loose waves around her shoulders, and her face was bare of the heavy makeup she wore at the office. She looked younger, almost approachable. In her hands, she held a small gift bag wrapped in pink tissue paper. "Hi," she said, her voice uncertain. "I know I'm early. I couldn't stop thinking about that pinky swear." Olivia let out a shriek of pure joy and launched herself at Diana's legs. You came. I knew you would." Diana's expression softened in a way Noah had never seen before. She crouched down, setting the gift bag aside, and wrapped her arms around Olivia in a gentle hug. "Of course I came. I told you I would, didn't I?" Noah stood frozen in the doorway, his heart pounding. He'd been prepared for a phone call. He'd been prepared for a carefully worded email, or a text message, or even a vague excuse delivered through a third party. He had not been prepared for Diana Sterling to show up at his doorstep on a Saturday afternoon, looking like she'd just stepped out of a lifestyle magazine spread about casual weekend chic. "Diana," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "What are you doing here?" She straightened, meeting his gaze. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of defiance, maybe, or apology. "I told you I would come. I meant it. I don't break my promises." "She brought a present," Olivia announced, grabbing the gift bag and shaking it with uncontainable enthusiasm. "Can I open it, please, Daddy?" Noah looked from Olivia's pleading face to Diana's carefully neutral expression. He thought about the charade at the gala, the kiss, the press conference, the carefully manufactured narrative that was already making its way through every tabloid in the city. He thought about the walls he'd built around his life, the careful separations he'd maintained between work and home. And then he looked at his daughter, who was practically vibrating with excitement, and he knew there was only one answer he could give. "Sure, Liv. Go ahead." Olivia tore into the tissue paper with the fervor of a tiny hurricane. Inside the bag was a plush dolphin, its glossy gray body impossibly soft, with a tiny smile stitched onto its face. "His name is Finley," Diana said, a hint of nervousness creeping into her voice. "I saw him in a shop window on the way here. He reminded me of you." Olivia hugged the dolphin to her chest. I love him so much." "Thank you, pretty lady." "You're welcome, sweetheart. And you can call me Diana if you want." "Diana?" Olivia repeated, tasting the name. "That's a pretty name. Like a princess." Diana laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and warm. "I don't think anyone's ever called me a princess before." "Can Diana stay for lunch, Daddy?" Olivia asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. "Please, we have leftover mac and cheese. It's the good kind, with the crunchy breadcrumbs on top." Noah opened his mouth to say no. He had a dozen reasons, all of them good. This was too fast. This was too complicated. This was a woman who had used him as a prop in a corporate game, and he had no reason to trust her. But then he looked at Olivia. He looked at the way she was clutching the dolphin, the way she kept glancing at Diana like she was some kind of miracle. And he thought about the nightmares, the fear that lived in his daughter's heart no matter how many times he promised he'd never leave. "Stay for lunch," he heard himself say. "I'll make grilled cheese. The good kind, with the sourdough." Diana's eyebrows shot up. Grilled cheese sounds perfect. The afternoon unfolded with a surreal kind of normalcy. Diana sat cross-legged on the living room floor while Olivia showed her all her favorite toys. the talking robot, the rainbow slime, the collection of seashells from a trip to the beach 3 years ago. She listened to every story with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at the right moments. Noah stood in the kitchen, flipping grilled cheese sandwiches on the stove, watching the scene unfold through the pass-through window. His chest felt tight. He couldn't figure out if it was anxiety or something else entirely. "Your daughter is incredible," Diana said, appearing at the kitchen doorway. Olivia had gone to her room to organize her dolls for a proper introduction, and Noah didn't turn around. "She's the best thing I've ever done. I can tell. She's smart, and she's so—" Diana hesitated, searching for the word. "She's so full of light. You've done a wonderful job with her." "Thanks." He slid the sandwiches onto plates and turned to face her. "Why are you really here, Diana, and don't give me the pinky swear speech. I know you have a team of people who could have sent a gift. You didn't have to come yourself." Diana looked away, her jaw tightening. "Because I wanted to. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about her. Or you." She met his gaze again, and there was a rawness in her expression that he hadn't seen before. "I know what you think of me, Noah. I know you see me as a manipulative CEO who uses people like chess pieces. And you're not wrong. I've done terrible things to get where I am. I've lied, I've cheated, I've thrown people under the bus without a second thought." "Then why are you here?" he pressed, his voice quiet. She took a step closer, close enough that he could see the faint freckles on her nose, the tiny crack in her lip balm. "Because last night, when Olivia ran into my arms, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. I felt hope, and I haven't felt that in a very long time." Noah stared at her, his thoughts a tangled mess. He thought about the women he'd dated since his divorce, brief, forgettable affairs that never lasted more than a few weeks. He thought about the loneliness that lived in his chest like a second heartbeat. He thought about the way Diana had looked at Olivia, like she was seeing something precious and fragile. "Lunch is ready," he said finally, because he didn't trust himself to say anything else. They ate in the small dining room, Olivia chattering a mile a minute between bites of grilled cheese. Diana asked about school, about friends, about the bunny incident that Olivia recounted with theatrical drama. And Noah sat back, watching, feeling the careful boundaries he'd constructed begin to blur around the edges. After lunch, Diana helped Olivia set up a tea party with a new dolphin and a rotating cast of stuffed animals. She sipped imaginary tea from a tiny plastic cup with exaggerated seriousness, making Olivia giggle until she snorted milk out her nose. And then, as the afternoon began to fade into evening, Diana rose to leave. "Thank you for today," she said softly, standing at the front door with her coat over her arm. "I know I wasn't invited. I know I just showed up. But thank you." "You're welcome," Noah said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "Olivia had a great time." "Did you?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. He didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was complicated, and he didn't have the words for it. Diana nodded, accepting his silence. "I'll see you at the office on Monday." She turned to go, then paused.
"Noah."
"The press is going to run with the story. They're going to dig into your past, your ex-wife, everything. I've already set up a security detail for both of you, just in case." A security detail. He felt the familiar cold edge of anger creep back in. "I didn't ask for that. I know, but I'm not taking any chances." Her voice was firm, but her eyes were soft. "You're important to me, Noah. Both of you. And I won't let anyone hurt you. Not if I can help it." She left before he could respond, disappearing into a sleek black car that had materialized at the curb. Noah stood on the stoop, watching the taillights fade into the twilight, and felt the weight of everything she'd said settle on his shoulders like a heavy coat. "Daddy." Olivia appeared beside him, her hand slipping into his. "Is Diana coming back?" He looked down at his daughter. Her eyes were bright with hope, and her small hand was warm and trusting. She had no idea about the danger, the exposure, the tangled web of corporate politics and media scrutiny that was about to descend on their lives. "Yeah, Liv," he said, pulling her close. "I think she is." But even as he said the words, a cold knot formed in his stomach. Because Diana Sterling had just told him she was willing to protect them. And the only reason she would need to do that was if the threat was bigger than either of them had anticipated. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. Your ex-wife just sold her story to a tabloid. She's claiming you kidnapped Olivia and faked her death. You have 24 hours before it hits the newsstands. A friend. Noah's blood ran cold. The day had started with pancakes and cartoons. It was ending with a war, and he had no idea who the enemy really was. The text message had burned a hole in Noah's brain all night. He hadn't slept. He'd sat in the dark living room, Olivia's plush dolphin clutched in his hands, staring at the phone screen until the letters blurred into a meaningless smear. His ex-wife, Vanessa. 3 years of silence. 3 years of nothing but the occasional child support check that bounced more often than it cleared, and now she'd crawled out of whatever hole she'd been hiding in to sell a lie to the highest bidder. Kidnapped. Faked her death. The words were so absurd they almost made him laugh. Almost. Because he knew how the tabloids worked. They didn't need the truth. They needed a story that would sell copies, and a disgraced ex-Navy SEAL stealing his own daughter from a grieving mother was the kind of headline that moved units. The security detail Diana had mentioned was already in place. He'd spotted them at dawn, 2 men in a nondescript sedan, parked across the street, pretending to read newspapers. He should have been grateful. Instead, he felt like a cornered animal. Daddy. Olivia's voice drifted from the hallway, soft and sleepy. Why are you awake? The sun isn't even up yet. He turned to find her standing in the doorway, Finley the dolphin tucked under one arm, her hair a tangled disaster. She looked so small, so fragile, so utterly dependent on him to keep the world from crashing down on her head. Couldn't sleep, baby, he said, forcing his voice into a calm register. Too much grilled cheese. Probably gave me weird dreams. Olivia padded over and climbed into his lap, resting her head against his chest. I had a good dream. Diana was there, and we were at the zoo and she let me feed the giraffes. She said I could ride one if I was brave enough. Noah closed his eyes, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. That sounds like a great dream. It wasn't a dream, Daddy. It was a plan. She's going to take me to the zoo. You'll see. The certainty in her voice broke something inside him. She trusted so completely, so unconditionally. She had no idea that the world was full of people who would use her trust as a weapon. And now, because of him, because of the life he'd built and the choices he'd made, that trust was about to be tested in ways she couldn't possibly understand. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. Diana, I need to see you.
Now.
At my office. The situation is worse than I thought. He typed back a quick response.
Can't.
Olivia. I'll send a car. Bring her. I have a private playroom. It's safe. Noah hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to keep Olivia as far away from this mess as possible. But the other part of him, the part that had survived ambushes and firefights by trusting the right people at the right time, whispered that Diana might be his only ally. Get dressed, Liv, he said, setting her gently on the floor. We're going on an adventure. The car arrived within 20 minutes, driven by a woman with a sharp jaw and watchful eyes who introduced herself as Maya. Head of Ms. Sterling's personal security, she said, her voice clipped and professional. We'll have you at the office in 15 minutes. Please keep your seatbelts fastened at all times. Olivia, who had never been in a car with a security detail before, was absolutely thrilled. This is like being in a spy movie, Daddy. Are we being chased? Are there bad guys? No, sweetheart, Noah said, his hand finding hers. Just a quick trip to see Diana. Yay. I get to see Diana again. She's going to be so surprised. Maya caught Noah's eye in the rearview mirror. Her expression was unreadable, but he saw something there. A flicker of concern, maybe, or warning. He filed it away for later. Diana's office was a sprawling penthouse atop Sterling Tower, all glass walls and minimalist furniture, and a view that made Manhattan look like a toy city. Noah had been here 100 times for work, but he'd never seen it like this. The conference table had been pushed aside, replaced by a small play area complete with a dollhouse, a stack of picture books, and a tablet loaded with children's games. Olivia's eyes went wide. This is amazing. Can I play with everything? Everything, Diana confirmed, kneeling down to Olivia's level. I've got snacks in the mini fridge, and there's a bathroom just through that door. If you need anything, Maya will be right outside. She's very good at puzzles. You're the best, Olivia declared, already racing toward the dollhouse. Diana straightened, her smile fading as she looked at Noah. We need to talk. In my office.
Now.
He followed her into the adjacent room, a space dominated by a massive desk and floor-to-ceiling windows. The door slid shut behind them with a soft hiss, sealing them in a bubble of silence. Vanessa sold the story to the Chronicle, Diana said without preamble. They're running it as a cover feature. The seal who stole his daughter. I've already had my legal team send a cease and desist, but it won't be enough. They're going to print it. I know, Noah said, his voice flat. I got a text last night. She studied him, her eyes sharp. You're taking this remarkably well. I've been through worse. He walked to the window, staring out at the city. In Afghanistan, I watched my best friend bleed out in my arms. I've been shot, stabbed, and blown up. A tabloid story is just noise. It's not just noise, Diana said, her voice hardening. This isn't the battlefield, Noah. This is a different kind of war. They'll dig up everything. Your military record, your divorce, your financial history. They'll make you look like a monster. And they'll use Olivia to do it. He turned to face her. I know. That's why I'm going to stop it. How he was about to answer when the door slid open. Maya appeared, her face pale. Miss Sterling, we have a problem. The press is assembling downstairs. Someone leaked your location. They're calling it a standoff. They're saying Kincaid is holding his daughter hostage, and you're the negotiator. Diana's face went white. That's insane. Who leaked it? We're tracing the source now. But we need to get Kincaid and the girl out of here.
Now.
No, Noah said, his voice sharp. We don't run. Running makes us look guilty. We go downstairs, we face them, and we tell the truth. Diana stared at him like he'd just suggested they fly to the moon. You want to give an impromptu press conference without preparation, without a strategy. I want to tell them who I am, he said, his voice steady. I'm a father. I'm a veteran. I'm a man who has spent 3 years raising his daughter alone because her mother walked out. And I'm done hiding. The conviction in his voice seemed to shift something in Diana. Her eyes softened, just for a moment, and then hardened again.
Fine.
But we do this my way. We control the narrative. We don't give them anything they can twist. She moved to her desk, pressing a button on her intercom. Get a podium set up in the lobby. Pull the security cameras and start streaming. I want every word we say recorded and broadcast. No room for misquotes. Within minutes, they were in the elevator descending toward the lobby. Noah held Olivia's hand, his grip steady and reassuring. Are we going to see the reporters? Olivia asked, her voice filled with curiosity rather than fear. I've never been on TV before. You're going to be on TV, Noah said, forcing a smile. But you don't have to say anything. You just have to stand next to me and hold my hand. Can you do that? Easy, she said, grinning. I'm great at hand-holding. The lobby was a sea of cameras and microphones. The moment the elevator doors opened, the questions started flying, a cacophony of voices demanding answers. Noah stepped forward, shielding Olivia with his body, and walked toward the podium that had been set up at the center of the space. Diana stepped up beside him, her hand finding his. I'm with you, she murmured, so softly only he could hear. He nodded, not trusting his voice. I'm Noah Kincaid, he said into the microphone, his voice ringing through the vast space. I'm a former Navy SEAL. I'm a father. And I'm here to tell you the truth about what happened 3 years ago. The crowd quieted, a hush falling over the room. My ex-wife, Vanessa Kincaid, left me and our daughter 3 years ago. She didn't leave a note. She didn't say goodbye. She just disappeared. I've been raising Olivia alone ever since. I have the court documents, the custody agreements, and the witnesses to prove it. The story that's being sold to the tabloids is a lie. He paused, gathering himself. I know I'm not perfect. I know I've made mistakes. But I have never, ever done anything to harm my daughter. She is my entire world. And I will spend the rest of my life protecting her from anyone who tries to hurt her. A reporter's voice cut through the silence. If you're telling the truth, why did Vanessa sell this story? What's her motive? Diana stepped forward before Noah could answer, her expression cool and commanding. That's a very good question. And I think the answer is simple. My team has been investigating Vanessa Kincaid for the past 6 hours. We've discovered she has a history of substance abuse, financial fraud, and multiple outstanding warrants in 3 different states. She sold this story to fund her legal defense. It's a desperate attempt to extort money from a man who has already given her everything she asked for. The room erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted over each other, their voices merging into a wall of sound. Noah stood frozen, processing what Diana had just revealed. She hadn't told him. She'd investigated his ex-wife without his knowledge. She'd weaponized her resources to protect him, just like she'd promised. But there was something else in her voice, something that made his blood run cold. A calculation. A plan. I'll take questions now, Diana said smoothly, stepping up to the microphone. But I'll ask you to keep them civil. We have a child present. Noah pulled Olivia closer, his mind racing. Diana had just turned the narrative on its head, but at what cost? She'd exposed Vanessa's secrets, which would only make her more desperate. And desperate people did desperate things. As the press conference wound down and the security team ushered them back toward the elevator, Noah felt Diana's hand on his arm. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, she whispered. About the investigation. I needed to make sure the information was solid before I acted. How did you find out so fast? He asked, his voice low. I have resources, she said, her eyes meeting his. And I told you, Noah. I protect what's mine. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in silence. Olivia was chattering excitedly about being on TV, but Noah barely heard her. He was too busy processing the cold, hard truth of what Diana had done and what it meant for all of them. She was a wolf. He'd known that from the start, but she'd just proven she was his wolf. And there was no going back from that. His phone buzzed. Another text, this time from an unlisted number. Clever. But the game's not over. You think you've won? I have something you'll never see coming. Vanessa, his ex-wife. And she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Noah looked at Diana, at the fierce protectiveness in her eyes, at the way she was already planning their next move. He looked at Olivia, at the trust in her small face, at the innocence he would kill to protect, and he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this war was far from over. The trap had been sprung. But the wolf was watching, and she was ready to strike back. 3 weeks had passed since the press conference that turned Noah Kincaid from an invisible operations manager into a tabloid fixture. The headlines had shifted from the seal who stole his daughter to the ex-wife's web of lies to, most recently, Sterling Empire's secret weapon, the veteran and the CEO. Diana's legal team had eviscerated Vanessa's claims so thoroughly that her own lawyer had dropped her as a client. She'd gone underground again. But this time, no one was looking for her. The story had moved on as stories always did. But Noah hadn't moved on. He'd spent every night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Diana had said during that press conference. She'd called him hers. She'd said she protected what was hers. And he hadn't known what to do with that. Hadn't known if it was a declaration or a warning. Today, he was standing in a courtroom that looked nothing like the sterile, intimidating chambers of his custody battle. This was a small, wood-paneled room in the family court building, filled with the soft buzz of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of old paper. Olivia was beside him, wearing her favorite dress, the one with the tiny rocket ships, and holding Finley the dolphin against her chest. Diana was on his other side, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She was wearing a simple gray suit, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail, her face carefully neutral. But he could feel the tension radiating from her, the same tension that had been humming under her skin for 3 weeks. All rise, the bailiff announced, and Judge Patricia Morrison entered the room. She was a small woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd presided over Noah's custody case 3 years ago, and she'd been the one to grant him full custody when Vanessa had failed to show up for the final hearing. Today, she was here to finalize something else, Mr. Kincaid, Judge Morrison said, taking her seat. I've reviewed the petition and I must say, it's rather unusual. Noah swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. But I've thought about it carefully, and I believe it's the right decision. The judge's eyes flicked to Diana, then to Olivia, then back to Noah. You're asking the court to amend Olivia's birth certificate to include Ms. Sterling as a second legal guardian. This isn't adoption, but it's close. Are you certain this is what you want? Yes, Your Honor. Diana stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. Your Honor, I know this is unconventional. I know the public has seen a lot of rumors and speculation about my relationship with Noah and Olivia. But I want to be very clear. This isn't about image. This isn't about the media. This is about a little girl who deserves to know that she has a family that will never, ever leave her. Olivia tugged on Noah's sleeve. Daddy, can I say something? Noah looked down at her. She was 8 years old, with a gap-toothed smile and eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. But in this moment, she looked like a princess. His princess. Go ahead, Liv. Olivia stepped forward, clutching Finley to her chest. Your Honor, she said, her voice loud and clear. Diana is my friend. She pinky swore to be there for me, and she kept her promise. She came to my tea party and played with my dolls, and she didn't even mind when I spilled juice on her fancy shirt. She paused, taking a breath. She's not my real mommy. My real mommy left and didn't come back. But Diana is my other mommy, the one I choose. And I want her to be my family forever. The courtroom was silent. Even the bailiff had stopped shuffling his papers. Judge Morrison's eyes had gone soft, and she was blinking rapidly. Miss Sterling, the judge said, her voice thick. Do you accept this responsibility? Do you understand what it means to be a legal guardian to this child? Diana stepped forward, her hand finding Olivia's. I understand completely, Your Honor. I've spent my whole life building an empire, but I never realized until I met this little girl and her father that empires don't matter. People matter. Family matters. And I want nothing more than to be part of theirs. The judge nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. Then I see no reason to deny this petition. Congratulations, Ms. Sterling. You are now legally a guardian to Olivia Kincaid. Olivia let out a shriek of joy and threw her arms around Diana's waist. Diana laughed, a sound so pure and unguarded that it made Noah's heart ache. He wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling them into a tight embrace. Thank you, he murmured into Diana's hair. Thank you for everything. She pulled back, her eyes shining. I told you. I protect what's mine. Later that evening, they stood on the rooftop of Diana's penthouse, watching the sun sink below the Manhattan skyline. Olivia had fallen asleep on the couch, Finley tucked under her arm, a small smile on her face. Maya was stationed at the door, her watchful eyes scanning the perimeter, and Noah turned to Diana, who was leaning against the railing, her gaze fixed on the horizon. I still can't believe you did that. The petition, the courtroom, all of it. She shrugged, a hint of vulnerability creeping into her expression. I couldn't let her grow up without knowing she had someone. I couldn't let her feel like I felt when I lost. She broke off, her jaw tightening. When you lost your son, Noah said softly. You told me about him. That night on the balcony. She nodded, her eyes distant. His name was Leo. He was 4 years old. And he was the only person in the world who ever loved me unconditionally. When I lost him, I thought I'd never feel that kind of love again. I thought I'd closed myself off to it forever. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And then I met you.
I met Olivia.
And I realized that love doesn't run out. It doesn't disappear. It just waits for the right person to come along. Noah reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. You're not closed off, Diana. You're the most open person I've ever met. You just didn't know it. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. I was so scared of getting hurt again. That's why I kept my distance. That's why I pushed you away. But you never pushed back. You just kept showing up. You and Olivia. Because you kept showing up too, he said. You showed up at my doorstep with a dolphin. You showed up at the press conference and told the world the truth. You showed up in court and made my daughter's dream come true. You showed up, Diana. That's all I ever needed. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. I love you, Noah. I love you, and I love Olivia, and I'm so terrified of messing it up that I can barely breathe sometimes. Then don't mess it up, he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Just keep showing up. That's all I ask. She laughed, a shaky, relieved sound. I think I can do that. He leaned in, pressing his lips to hers. It was a soft kiss, a promise, a vow. The kind of kiss that said everything they didn't have words for. When they pulled apart, the city lights were reflected in Diana's eyes, and she looked like the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Come on, she said, taking his hand. Let's go check on Olivia. She's probably dreaming about zoo trips again. They walked back inside, hand in hand, and paused at the doorway to the living room. Olivia was still asleep on the couch, Finley tucked under her arm, her face peaceful. Diana knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. I promise you live, she whispered, so softly only Noah could hear. I will never leave you. I will never break a promise. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are. Noah leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene unfold, and felt something shift in his chest. He'd spent 3 years building walls, protecting himself and his daughter from a world that had hurt them. He'd been a soldier, a survivor, a single father who never let anyone get too close, and then Diana Sterling had shown up, with her midnight blue gown and her careful smiles and her pinky swears. She had broken through every wall he'd built. She had made Olivia laugh. She had stood in front of a room full of cameras and told the world the truth. She had fought for them, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. He thought about the gala night, the way she'd leaned in and whispered, I'm your date. He'd thought it was a performance. He'd thought it was manipulation. But now he understood. It was the beginning. The moment she'd stepped into his life and refused to leave. Daddy. Olivia's voice was sleepy, her eyes blinking open. Is Diana staying for dinner? Noah looked at Diana, who was still kneeling beside his daughter, her expression soft and hopeful. Yeah, Liv, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Diana's staying. She's staying for good. Olivia sat up, her face breaking into a grin. Forever, Diana extended her pinky.
Forever.
Pinky swear. Olivia linked her tiny pinky with Diana's, just like she had 3 weeks ago. You better not break it, she said, her voice serious. I'll know if you do. I have special powers. Special powers? Diana asked, her eyebrows raised. Yep. I can sense when people are lying. It's my superpower. Noah laughed, the sound surprising him. It was the first time he'd laughed like that in years, a deep, genuine laugh that seemed to come from somewhere he'd forgotten existed. Well, then, Diana said, her eyes twinkling. I guess I'll just have to be honest with you forever. That's a deal, Olivia declared, flopping back onto the couch. Now can we have pizza? I'm starved. Noah walked over to the couch, pulling Olivia into his arms and hoisting her up. Pizza, it is. But you're getting extra veggies on yours. Gross, Olivia groaned, but she was laughing. Diana stood, her hand finding Noah's. They walked toward the kitchen, the city lights shimmering beyond the window, and for the first time in 3 years, Noah felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He thought about the gala, about the flashbulbs and the chaos, and the way his entire world had turned upside down. He thought about the text from Vanessa, the threat that had hung over them like a storm cloud. He thought about the court case, the press conference, the long nights and longer days, and he thought about Olivia, who had run into a stranger's arms and called her mommy. She'd seen something that night that he'd been too blind to see, that Diana Sterling was not his enemy. She was his partner, his protector, his future. They ordered pizza, the 3 of them, and ate it on the rooftop under the stars. Olivia told them about the zoo, about the baby giraffes and the penguins and the promise Diana had made. And Diana listened, her eyes shining, her hand never leaving Noah's when Olivia finally fell asleep. Curled up on a lounge chair with Finley tucked against her chest, Diana turned to Noah. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice soft. He looked at her. The woman who had turned his life into a headline and then turned that headline into a love story. "I'm thinking about how I used to be so scared of letting anyone in," he said. "I thought I had to do everything alone. I thought I had to protect Olivia by keeping the world at arm's length. But I was wrong.
She needed more than just me.
She needed you." Diana's eyes glistened. "And what about you? What do you need?" He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "I need you," he whispered. "I need you to keep showing up, to keep breaking my walls down, to keep being the wolf who protects her pack." "I can do that," she said, her lips brushing against his. "I've been doing it my whole life. I just didn't know I was waiting for the right people to protect." They stayed on the rooftop until dawn, wrapped in each other, watching the city wake up around them. And when the first light of morning painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Noah looked at his daughter, at his partner, and felt a quiet certainty settle in his heart. The war was over. Vanessa had gone silent. The press had moved on. But the battle for their future would never truly end, because love required constant work, constant presence, constant choice, and he was ready to choose her. "Every single day, Diana," he said, his voice quiet. Thank you. For that night at the gala. For saying you were my date." She smiled, the smile that had started everything. "I wasn't lying, Noah. I was your date. I've been your date since the moment I saw you standing against that pillar, looking like you'd rather be anywhere else. I just didn't know it yet." He kissed her then, a long, slow kiss that tasted like hope and promises and forever. And somewhere in the distance, the city hummed its morning song, and Olivia slept on, dreaming of zoos and dolphins and the woman who had Pinky sworn to be her family.